distinctly remember a time in the 8th grade when I sat in a study hall working ferociously on my application to this very school, while a friend of mine sat next to me. At the time, boarding school application deadlines were approaching rapidly, and pretty much everybody in my school was applying to a boarding school with a competitive acceptance rate, including my friend. I asked her if she completed her applications yet, and she told me no. I was puzzled by this because there she sat, slumped in her chair, tapping her pencil, looking off into space, and relaxed as if she were on vacation. And so, I asked her what her secret was, because I was pretty much pulling my hair out over getting into the schools I was applying to. She looked back at me with that same confusion and said, "What do you mean? Nobody's actually doing their applications, their parents are doing it for them." And that was when I realized that my parents are very different than others, and ever since then, I've been completely fascinated with the differences of how I was raised, as compared to my peers, and how different my life is because of that. Going back though, although my physical body was raised in a small town in Connecticut, my heart lies in Vermont, tucked within the mountains where I spent a large amount of my childhood. I spent my days running across the fields, driving a tractor on my dad's lap, scavenging for blackberries, hiking miles and miles with my father by my side. If I fell, he didn't stop. If I got tired, he didn't stop. If I capsized the sailboat in the middle of the lake, it was my job to figure out a way to get back to shore. He would look at me and say, "Good luck." And that's pretty much how my parents raised me. It was always my job to figure out a way to get back to shore. It is because of the many odd and unconventional tactics my parents used to raise me to be a resilient human being with a strong core character that I am on this stage today. It is because of the intellectual freedom my parents gave me as a child that I have an innate sense of wonder and curiosity about myself that I can guarantee wouldn't have ever arisen if they hadn't given me the freedom to think, to explore, to be creative. If I'd been thrown into extracurriculars and athletics the second I was able to walk, like all of my peers were, I wouldn't have ever discovered my love of reading or photography or picked up a guitar for the first time. In other words, parents today are suffocating their kids so much that they aren't giving them a chance to say, "But Mom or Dad, I don't like hockey or lacrosse or violin." Parents must trust a child's innate capability to know their limits and to ask for help when they really need it. My parents were always there to catch me growing up, but the difference, they waited until I actually fell to try and catch me. And growing up, these are my rules. 1, read. 2, play outside, scrape your knees, but get back up. 3, never say no to an adventure. And the 4th and most enforced rule was this: you may not participate in any activity that interferes with a family dinner every single night. That was it. No bedtime, no rules, no tutoring, no athletics, no extracurriculars, but I was challenged. You see, my parents didn't worry about the little things, and to others, this seems like absolute ludicrous because somewhere in the past generation, it seems as though parenting methodology has shifted so that worrying about every single thing equals responsible parenting. So many parents take on the responsibility of all their children's actions, and so they hover over their kids to make sure that they themselves don't get an F in parenting. This is intensified so much because as the mortality rates of kids has lowered due to the progression of medicine, it has become rarer and rarer for a child to get sick and die. And so many parents now take on the responsibility to play God. But it's all an illusion. My parents in this audience cannot stop this roof from crashing down on me if it wants to. And as a child myself, I can attest to the fact that parents will never have complete control over their kids. So why do so many parents bend over backwards, trying to chase something that will always be running away from them faster than their feet can move? But another thing that parents worry about is something far too overlooked and buried: emotion. I get it. Parents, of course, want to protect their kids from the big bad monsters, but since when did any emotion besides happiness become one of those monsters? If I were to take any child in this crowd and have them go up to their parents and say, "Mom or Dad, I'm really nervous about the school play," I can guarantee the parent's response would be, "Don't worry." Or if they were to say, Mom or Dad, I had a really bad day at school, they would say, don't think about it, sweetie. Whatever happened to feeling? Kids today are growing up with absolutely no knowledge of how to deal with feelings such as anxiety, frustration, anger, sadness, because as a kid they are constantly told that those feelings are invalid and should not be felt. I believe we should instead teach our kids how to sit with our emotions, no matter how scary they may seem. It is proven, even, that if and only if we let ourselves feel an emotion, it only has the capability to last 5 to 30 minutes. It is when we fight these emotions and invalidate them that they can take over our life. My parents, they chose to teach me how to sit with my emotions through nature. It seems as though when a human enters the wild, there's an unwritten agreement we sign where we surrender our power. It is in nature we remember that we can't control everything, that from work comes reward, that some things just don't work out. If it starts raining, we don't tell ourselves, oh my gosh, it's actually not raining. Instead, we find shelter, we put on a jacket, and we wait for the storm to pass. We accept and we adapt. My parents used to make me hike mountains all the time to teach me how to sit with feelings such as dread, exhaustion, physical restrictions, and feelings of, I just want to give up. My father, he's responsible for getting me started in fishing when I was 2 years old. But he taught me how to fish to teach me patience. If any of you have been fishing before, you understand that sometimes you have to hike out miles to a lake, row out a very heavy rowboat, and wait 1, maybe 2, maybe even 3 hours before you catch a fish, and many times you don't even catch one, and that's okay. If I didn't catch a fish after hours and hours of strenuous work, my parents didn't go buy me a stuffed animal fish to make me feel better. Instead, I laced up my boots, I rowed back in, I accepted my sadness, and I tried again later. On the contrary, in today's society, we're seeing a large percentage of kids growing up with the notion that everybody gets a medal. This is in part because so many schools and even parents are constantly reinforcing and rewarding these kids when it's not even necessary. Now they're growing up, they're going off into the workspace, and they're facing extreme shock, confusion, and even quitting their jobs when their boss doesn't reward them every time they show up to work, or they complete a task that was expected of them. All of the pieces I've just spoken to you about have begun to reflect themselves in what is known as the helicopter parenting era. All of the attention and pressure parents put on their kids sits, and all of a sudden they enter into college or they go off to work and their parents aren't around anymore. All of a sudden they're realizing that they're not special and that their parents can't intervene the second that things go wrong. But most of all, they're realizing that they just spent the past several years forming the perfect self on paper, but in reality they have no idea who they actually are. In a survey of 297 college students, it was found that the students of helicopter parents had greatly increased rates of anxiety, depression, and overall a great dissatisfaction for life. Julie Lithcott-Hames, the former dean of freshmen at Stanford University for 10 years, recounts seeing case after case of these incoming freshmen who were the perfect students. They had the perfect applications, but in person, they were unmotivated, burnt out, lacking character, and depressed. She got to a point of such concern for these kids to where she wrote a book as a plea for parents to change their ways, and we're hearing similar pleas from the workspace as well. Citibank runs one of the most competitive internship programs in the world, and it's every econ major's dream to get their resume even glanced at by Citi. I went to them about this topic, for they were the company that I would assume would focus most intently on getting the Ivy League kids with the perfect GPAs and the perfect everything. But upon speaking to a manager at Citi, I found the exact opposite of what I had expected I would hear. He revealed to me that it is so hard to get a job at Citi, not because the lack of qualified students, but the lack of students who are intellectually capable for the job, who still have character and social skills. He himself chooses a couple students to study under him as an intern. But when it comes down to the one he's going to hire, he told me it simply comes down to the one who can hold a conversation. Not the one with the perfect score or the perfect Ivy League school or the perfect GPA, but the one who can hold a conversation. That was it. The perspective of how to raise a child or even raise yourself is shifting away from producing perfection to producing whole. And we're seeing this in places as competitive as Stanford University and Citibank. And so I challenge you all, not just parents, to get brave. Instead of worrying about your grades or your resumes, worry about the impact that you have on this world. Learn how to think. Learn how to communicate. Learn how to listen. This isn't just for parents, but for kids too, because whether we think it or not, we do have control over how we live our lives. And if there's anything I want you to take away from this talk, it is this. 1, downtime can sometimes be productive. It is when we have that space that we can discover more than one could ever imagine. 2, it is impossible to have complete control over life. So why are we worrying about everything? 3, do what you love, not what looks best on paper. And finally, don't be afraid to feel. We're all human. Thank you.